Jake Paul might be looking to take over the UFC. In the ever-evolving feud between Paul and the UFC president Dana White, Paul seems to finally have put his money where his mouth is. According to a tweet from The Problem Child, he invested in the UFC. What kind of investment did Jake Paul put into the UFC? Can his investment be part of a larger hostile takeover? And what does Dana White think about all this? We'll talk about all of that and a whole lot more, so don't go anywhere. So how did Jake Paul invest in the UFC? Since Dana White never agreed to Jake Paul's demands of increased fighter pay and long-term healthcare, it seems Paul has taken matters into his own hands. On the 25th of January 2022, Paul announced on Twitter that he invested in Endeavour Group Holdings, Inc. back in 2016, when Endeavour was known as WME-IMG. The company purchased the UFC for a sum of $4 billion. At the time of the sale, Dana White received an undisclosed sum from the sale and was able to remain president, owner, and day-to-day promoter. Endeavour Group Holdings, Inc. is a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange as EDR. So by purchasing stock of EDR, Jake Paul owns a part of the company that owns the UFC. In his announcement tweet, Paul wrote, "We believe EDR, Endeavour, can drive long-term economic value by increasing UFC fighter pay and providing them healthcare." In the tweet, Paul also tags investment firm Engine No. 1. He says he's seeking a partnership with the firm. We'll discuss more about Engine No. 1 a little later on. Paul's business partner, Geoffrey Woo, clarified that the goal of the investment is to revolutionize the MMA industry by not just talking about it, but by being about it. Fighter pay, healthcare, and championing women's sport. What kind of reaction did Paul's announcement get, though? Like many other of his antics, Jake Paul attracts fans and haters alike. Supporters of Paul's move against Dana White paint him as the underdog, the David against the Goliath, or as one Twitter user posted in the replies, Jake Paul is the Robin Hood of the fighting game. Middle-of-the-road replies question Paul's true intentions, but ultimately appreciate that he's bringing attention to the poor treatment of fighters in the UFC at the very least. Most of the hate comes in the form of outright mockery of Paul's investment. This group of Twitter users believes that Jake Paul only has a fraction of the money that it would actually take to instigate real change. Other haters just think Paul's doing this all for the attention. As another Twitter user wrote, "You think he invested to make an impact? LOL. He invested so that he can tweet." Geoffrey Woo's longer explanation of the investment didn't fare much better than that. Twitter users mocked Woo with tweets like, "Buying stock isn't newsworthy," and "I would take this seriously and respect it if you weren't an obvious cash-grabbing crypto shill." Regardless, Paul has remained steadfast in his statements that he believes that he can make a difference in fighter pay and long-term healthcare for UFC fighters. This investment is likely only the first volley in a much larger battle that will continue to unfold in the coming weeks and months. Has Dana White said anything about the investment? Dana White typically has a lot to say to The Problem Child. At the beginning of the year, the two went back and forth on Twitter, with White posting videos aimed directly toward Jake Paul. In one video, Dana White said, "I believe that you're a cheater and I believe that you use steroids." White also challenged Paul to start his own business in the MMA fight game, if he believes he can do it better. The social media war continued to rage on, eventually leading to Jake Paul releasing a diss track on YouTube making fun of Dana White and other UFC superstars, including Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. Regardless, White insists that he doesn't hate Jake Paul or hold any ill will towards him. In an interview in January of 2022, the UFC president said, "Everybody thinks I hate Jake Paul. I don't hate Jake Paul. I don't even know Jake Paul to hate the guy. He's out there doing his thing. He's trying to make some money just like everybody else is." However, Dana White went on to say that arguing with Jake Paul is ultimately pointless. White said, "I'm at a place where, why am I arguing with this guy? This is ridiculous. I'm not even talking about this guy anymore. There's no need for him and I to go back and forth about anything." Since then, White has stayed true to his work and remained silent about Jake Paul. But that doesn't mean that Jake Paul has stayed silent about Dana White. With his latest investments in the UFC's parent company, Paul said he's looking to revolutionize the UFC. But will his plan actually work? How does he plan on making changes? And what other hot water has Dana White found himself in? If you want the answers to those questions, you'll just have to keep watching. Will Jake Paul's investment work? By owning a portion of Endeavour Group Holdings, Paul is now officially officially a stakeholder and as such will have all the benefits of being one, including voting in stockholder meetings. Now, a stockholder's vote is only as powerful as the amount invested in the company. Since Endeavour is likely worth billions of dollars, the low six-figure investment that Paul said he put into the company is just a drop of water in the proverbial ocean. And that's where engine number one comes in. A mission statement on their website explains that they use environmental, social, and governance (ESG) data to drive economic value. In Jake Paul's tweet announcing the investment, he made sure to say that they're hoping to focus on UFC's ESG standards relating to fighters. Engine number one also stated that its goal is to harness the power of investors to hold companies accountable for what we stand behind, like strengthening our workforce, restoring the climate, and increasing transparency. One reply to Paul's tweet points out that his pairing up with engine number one may be enough to get him a seat on UFC's board. The investment firm had successfully placed 3 of its members on the board of ExxonMobil, despite only owning 0.02% of ExxonMobil's stock. If engine number one does partner up with Jake Paul, it would certainly be interesting to see him sitting across the boardroom table from Dana White. Engine number one has yet to respond to Paul's tweet. What does Jake Paul plan to do? Above all else, he's remained steadfast in his message since the 1st of January 2022. His goals are clear: increase fighter pay and provide long-term health care. He says just as much in his Dana White diss track. Since the social media banter hasn't gotten anywhere, Paul says he wants to continue to fight the good fight. Paul said in an interview, "Now I'm an official owner, technically, of the UFC in a very small way. But now my foot's in the door and I will continue to shake the tree from all angles." Paul is also quick to shut down the naysayers that claim this is all a publicity stunt or marketing stunt. He said, "For people that don't think I'm serious about it, you will see. We're talking to lawyers to begin a process to start a fighters union." Paul says that there are many big names in the UFC that support his cause in private, but don't say anything publicly for fear of reprisal from Dana White or the UFC. A famous fighter currently active in the UFC going public on Paul's side would certainly help his cause, and there's already plenty more trouble bubbling under the surface of the UFC. Who else is going after Dana White? Eyes are on Dana White for more than just the Jake Paul feud. Recently, it came to light that the UFC might be severely underpaying one of its biggest stars. Heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. Retired MMA fighter Mark Hunt was on Submission Radio recently, and he revealed his previous payday in comparison to the current champ. Hunt said, "I got paid $950,000 6 years ago, and I never had a belt." So that right there goes to show you how much these guys are getting exploited. Ngannou's payout was only $600,000, and that's only the beginning of it all. Ngannou's recent championship win extends his contract length with the UFC for another 3 fights. According to the champ, he doesn't think that's fair. Ngannou said, "I don't feel like I'm a free man. I don't feel like I've been treated well. It's unfortunate that I have to be in this position, that I have to say that. I feel like everyone should have the right to claim what's best for them." Wouldn't it be interesting to see Jake Paul reach out to the current heavyweight champ so that they can all get what they want? What do you think? Is Jake Paul doing some good, or is it all a publicity stunt? Should Dana White pay his fighters more, or is he free to run his business however he sees fit? Leave your answers in the comments below, and make sure to click subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest.